Greetings, I'm Jim Capsa, and this is Sports, Entertainment, People and Places. And today we're doing something a little different. We are combining my Pro Sport Report TV show, I was the producer and host for 36 years, with our new show called Sports, Entertainment, People and Places. And we're dedicating this show to two legends of Chicago sports history. Ernie Banks, of course, baseball's Hall of Famer, and Stan Mikita, National Hockey League Hall of Famer with the Chicago Blackhawks. Of course, Ernie Banks is Mr. Cub. And you viewers out there in the viewing audience don't really get much chance to see interviews with players like Ernie Banks and Stan Mikita, especially since they've passed away and out of the public eye. But this is something that I think is worth your while. And in the second half of our show, we're going to feature something that we've never had on our show before, and that is Monty Roberts, the real horse whisperer. He is a man from California who actually trains wild horses using humane methods. I know you're going to enjoy that part of our show. A little bit about myself. I am the producer of Inside Baseball. This is a DVD, and The Scout. These are both special programs that are available to all of you in the viewing audience. And at the end of our show, you'll find out how you can get DVDs of the shows that I've produced and a DVD of this show, today's show, Sports, Entertainment, People and Places. But now we're going to go back to 1982. And I had a show called the Pro Sport Report for 36 years. And these two interviews were done in a studio in Berwyn, Illinois, a western suburb of Chicago, in 1982 with Ernie Banks and Stan Mikita.
It's the Pro Sport Report with Jim Capsa. Exclusive interviews with guests from the world of professional and amateur sports. Now, here's your host on the Pro Sport Report, Jim Capsa.
Welcome to the Pro Sport Report once again. I'm Jim Capsa, and I have a bit of a smile on my face, but I have a heavy heart today because we're doing this show as a tribute to one of the biggest and best names in Chicago sports history, Mr. Cub, Ernie Banks. And this is the front page of a recent Chicago Tribune. Ernie Banks passed away. Mr. Cub is what they have on the Tribune. And here's the Sun-Times, Mr. Cub once again. And he certainly was Mr. Cub. He had such a great personality, always positive, never a harsh word out of this man's mouth. He was on our show in 1982. Before I start talking about that, I want to bring up a couple more photos. This is from the Sports Illustrated from last July, and they had Mr. Cub on the cover in his youth. And one more Sports Illustrated cover. This is a recent January issue of Sports Illustrated. Mr. Cub, born 1931, passed away January 2015, just a couple days before his birthday, which was on January 31st. And I brought along a book that we've promoted on our show a few times. It's a small book, but it's very interesting. It's got a lot of great photos in it. It's 101 Reasons to Love the Cubs. And of course, who else could be on the cover but Ernie Banks? And in 1982, which was the first year of the Pro Sport Report on cable TV in the Chicago area, we were fortunate to have several really big names in the world of sports. Ernie Banks was one. He actually came to our studio, which was then in Berwyn, Illinois, not in Chicago even. In Berwyn, Illinois, we had a small studio. And Mr. Cub, when I called him up, he said, sure, I'll be happy to come out there. And he says, after that, we'll play too. But anyway, you're going to see that interview from 1982, the first year of the Pro Sport Report. And it's going to bring a tear to my eyes because it was such a great time. After that, we're going to show you another 1982 interview with one of the greatest names in professional hockey, Stan Mikita, lifetime Blackhawk. And this is when Stan Mikita had, I think he was retired a couple of years when we did that interview, but he couldn't get hockey out of his system. However, he was an avid golfer, and at that time he was a golf pro up at Kemper Lakes Golf Club in Long Grove, Illinois. So you're going to enjoy both of these interviews, and after that, we've got a special surprise for you. Of course, Ernie Banks, Hall of Famer in baseball, and Makita Hall of Famer in hockey. We're going to have 3 very brief interviews with 3 more Hall of Famers. First of all, Andre the Hawk Dawson, another cherished name to all Cub fans. And that was done in 1991. After Andre Dawson, Brooks Robinson, one of the greatest, if not the greatest, third baseman of all time, played his entire career with the Baltimore Orioles. That was done in 2007. And then Red Schoendienst, one of the greatest second basemen of all time. And I enjoyed all these interviews so much, so I'm going to sit back and enjoy the show, and I hope you will too. We're going to start off with our 1982 interview with Mr. Cub, Ernie Banks.
Your playing days with the Cubs, you hit 512 home runs in your career. I suppose you've been asked this about 2 million times, but what are the things that you most remember? What are your most memorable moments as a Chicago Cub?
Well, I remember the enthusiasm of the fans at Wrigley Field. I remember the interest that young people had in us as regular players. I remember the wonderful ballpark and playing at Wrigley Field over the years, and I remember a lot of the great players that I had a chance to play with and against during my career.
Of course, Ernie is famous for saying, "Let's play 3 today." It was 2, of course, but nowadays you say, "Let's play 3," right? Actually, Ernie Banks leads the Cubs, either leads or is second in all-time categories in, I believe it's 5 out of the 10 categories in the official Green Book, and you're second in 3 of the other 5. So we don't need to say too much about your heroics with the Cubs. You are in the Hall of Fame, and did you ever yearn to get back on the coaching lines or the manager's hot seat in Major League Baseball?
No, I haven't. I was very fortunate as a Major League player. I played for 19 years. I coached for 2 years. I was a roving instructor for 2 years, and I went into marketing and sales for 2 years, and every step of the way was been most enjoyable and a good experience for me. I never had any aspirations to manage in the major leagues because it was not something I was looking forward to. It's a very complicated position, and I wanted to be on the side where I was involved with the younger players that coming up to baseball and the fans, and my life has carried me through that, and I've enjoyed it.
In talking to you before the show, you mentioned that you really weren't that interested in money, which kind of struck me as a little unusual because it seems that most of the ball players nowadays, that's primary of importance to them. And I would say that I'm not going to ask you what you made in your career, but it's a far cry from what the players of today are making. And I think that if Ernie were playing today, you'd command about $3 million a year. But what makes you say that you really weren't interested in the money? That had to be some kind of an incentive for you, Ernie.
Well, I feel that my basic philosophy in life, I come from Dallas, Texas, a large family, a family of 12, 7 boys and 5 girls, and all my life as a young man growing up, I didn't want to do anything that would change me as a person, whether it's money or whether it's popularity or whether it's finding gold. I mean, I really wanted to be Ernie Banks and be myself, and somehow in my mind I always felt that if I had a lot of money, I would be very rich, that it would change my life and I would be different. I wouldn't be nice as I should be to people, because basically that's my whole life. I love people, I love being with them.
You think you're the same Ernie Banks nowadays as you were back in 1954?
I've changed a lot, and what the reason is that, as my career went along and as I got out of baseball, I began to see and adjust to all the changes, the bigger parks, the AstroTurf, the high salaries that have been paid today to players, the fast transportation with the big jets and all that. I've accepted those changes and went right along with them, and I enjoy changes in life, but basically I've adjusted with them and changed with them.
Did you ever dream when you were playing high school ball you were in high school in 1952, I would imagine. Didn't you play just 2 years of professional ball before coming to the Cubs?
Actually, I was a softball player.
A softball player?
We had no baseball in high school I went to in Dallas, Texas, and I played on a church softball team for the most of my young life, and then a fellow by the name of Bill Barrett came up and asked me would I like to try playing baseball. That's when I got into baseball. But basically, I was a 16-inch softball player around Dallas, and I enjoyed that very much.
Not even the 12-inch, the big 16-inch without the gloves, huh?
Right, without the glove, and I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun.
Well, you must have had one or more people in your youth that taught you the fundamentals of playing hardball, because you played some real hardball through the years. Do you attribute your success or your learning the fundamentals to any one person?
Yes, I do. A fellow named Bill Bear and another guy named Hank Thompson used to play with the New York Giants.
Good third baseman.
Hank usually come through Dallas after the season was over, and when the major league player come into town, in those days people got excited, and he got me aside and he showed me little techniques about hitting and fielding and base running and those little things, and it stayed with me. And then after that, I moved up to Kansas City Monarchs, and a guy named Buck O'Neill helped me a lot in developing the fundamentals of the game. And then when I got to the major leagues, I worked a lot with a young man named Jackie Robinson. He helped me a lot with playing the infield positioning. And then I played with a guy named Gene Baker. So all through my career, I was with people who understood the finer points of playing baseball, positioning, the pitchers, the catcher's sign, the wind, the sun, and playing all those things, and it helped me a great deal.
Stan, you were one of the few people that were foreign-born that were playing in the National Hockey League. I don't know what the situation is today, but when you were playing, you might have been the only one not born in this country or Canada.
I don't know if I was the first, but I know I was the first from Czechoslovakia. I believe now with the influx of the Swedes, and there's also a lot of Czechoslovakians who either defected or through some means got their way over here. There's an awful lot of Europeans now playing in the NHL.
You, of course, learned a lot of your hockey in Canada, too. I mean, not learned, but you practiced up before you came to the Blackhawks, right?
Well, basically, I learned it up there. I was 8 years old when I left Czechoslovakia, and when I left Canada, I was 18, so I spent 10 years up in Canada, which were my formative years, the basic years when I was learning the fundamentals.
Did you spend much time in the minor leagues, or did you just jump right up to the Hawks?
No, I came right up from amateur hockey from the junior level up in Canada when I was, well, I came up for a cup of coffee and a sandwich when I was 18 years old, and came up to stay when I was 19.
That was in 58, 59?
58, 59 was for the cup of coffee, and 59, 60 was up to stay.
Let me read off some of these other things that some of the other records that I took out of the press guide. In goals, you were second among all the Blackhawks of all time to Bobby Hull.
Bobby who?
You remember him, don't you? Wasn't he on the same team?
Great hockey player. Still a good friend. 604
goals for Hull to 541 for Stan Mikita.
I'll leave it at 550.
Assists, Stan Mikita, #1, 926, and Bobby Hull only 549. He was too anxious on that slap shot to pass the puck, I guess.
Well, there was the difference. Bobby was the goal scorer, and that's what people paid to see, and that's the way Bobby felt. He said, I got to score the goals. I felt the same way, that they came to see me do something, and my job as a centerman was to set up the place. And I think that's where the difference shows up.
Well, as far as career total points, totaling those goals and assists, Mikita's at the top, 1,467, and Bobby Hull, 1,153. And then we get into playoff records. Stan Mikita is #1 with 91 in assists. A close second to Hull in goals, 59 to 62. Total points, 150 for Stan Mikita and 128 for Bobby Hull. So I think if anybody asked me, I'd say that you were the most valuable Blackhawk of all time.
Well, there's one statistic missing in there. I played 21 years with the Blackhawks, but I believe Bobby only played 17 or 16. Bobby did depart to the world-famous World Hockey Association, and you know, if Bobby had been there for the last part of his career, those
might have changed a little bit.
It could be different, right?
Well, tell us a little bit about what you're doing now. You've been out of hockey for 2 years, and you may or may not. You haven't decided yet whether you're itching enough to get back.
I know one thing I won't get in. That's skating again, professionally. No, I played a couple of old-timers games against fellas my own age, or preferably a little older, and enjoyed those very much. As far as my profession now, or my work, so to speak, which I don't call it work because I'm enjoying every minute of it. I'm a golf professional, which there is a difference between a professional golfer and a golf professional, you know.
Difference in the average scores, I would imagine.
Well, and also the money you make. Golf professional is strictly a club pro, and the professional golfer is somebody who goes out there and plays golf for a living, which I don't do. I get out once in a while. And
what's your handicap?
Well, because I am pro, it's 0. I have to, but I'm playing to maybe anywhere between a 3 and a 5, depending on the golf course, and depending on who I'm playing with.
Have you thought about giving the golf tour, the pro golf tour, a whirl?
No, sir, I have not. No, I know how tough another profession can be, the travel and so on, and I was fortunate enough in my career to play with an outstanding amount of people. You mentioned Bobby Hull. There were others: Kenny Warm, Doug Mones, Ab McDonald. You know, guys like Stapleton and so on down the line. In golf, you're out there by yourself. You're against that golf course and maybe the weather, and that's about it.
As I remember, Moose Vasco, he was one of the biggest players in the league at that time, wasn't he? He only weighed about 205, 210.
Well, that's what the
according to the program.
That's what the guide said, right? Moose carried probably 220 or 2.
Oh yeah.
Little more than 220.
But aren't they building him a little bigger these days?
Weight-wise, I don't know, but height-wise, they are. Yes, I think I've seen a couple of guys. Moose is about 6'3" or 6'4", and I think some of the fellows now are like 6'5".
How do you figure a guy like Wayne Gretzky? He's really not built that big. Was he 5'10" or 5'11", average weight? How come he's so phenomenal?
Number of reasons, I think. First of all, he's so smart. He's head and shoulders above everybody else when it comes to having something between the ears. He's an exceptionally deceptive skater. Very seldom do you knock him off his feet, and when you think you have him boxed in somewhere, he just turns the jets on again and he's gone. Great stick handler, great passer. You know, he just does everything so well.
What do you think might be a good idea for the National Hockey League?
Well, I think the fighting part of it, that the gooniness, quote unquote, that you see, the gang tactics. Some people might like it, maybe that's all they go to the game for, but majority of your fans would like to see a great hockey game, skating up and down, good body checking. You very seldom see a good body check anymore. I think the skills that got the players there in the first place, I think they don't practice those enough. And I'm talking the passing part of it. You pass the puck to a teammate, you make a great play. I applaud any play. I don't care if it's the Blackhawks or their opponent. Little things like that I think people would come out to see if they were executed properly.
How about telling the folks, would you like to put a plug in for your golf course up there? You need more people out there?
Didn't I mention that?
You mentioned you were a golf pro.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's Kemper Lakes. We're north of Long Grove, about 45 minutes from the western suburbs, straight up the toll road or up 290, and you're cutting me off now? We're out of time, right? Anyway, it's Kemper Lakes.
Stan, thanks very much for being on the Pro Sport Report. Andre, what are you doing in the White Sox dugout?
It's the same thing I'm doing now, waiting to get an interview done.
Well, Andre is one of the nicest guys in the major leagues. You bounced back from what a lot of people thought was an injury that wouldn't let you come back and play the way you are right now. How'd you do it?
Well, I don't think it was an injury that wouldn't let me come back. A lot of people wrote me off because of the fact that I was 35 years old and I had a history of knee problems. But they don't know what really drives an individual or what motivates you, what your work habits are. So I don't think I had a lot to prove. It was just that I felt I had to get the work done in the off season, the necessary work to prepare myself for the following season.
You go up to the plate, you're not thinking about hitting a home run every time, though, are you?
No, not at all. I think home runs are going to come when you least expect them to. The idea that I have when I'm up at the plate is I want to pick up the pitching patterns and I want to have a quality at-bat, make sure that I don't get cheated. There are going to be some times when you go up and you feel that you had a wasted at-bat, but try not to have too many of those. And my thinking is, again, just go up there and see the ball, drive the ball, and not try and do too much with your body as far as overswinging.
What kind of advice do you have for youngsters out there?
Well, to mainly pay special attention to instruction and be focused upon whatever you're into, and most of all, make a situation a lot easier for yourself if you follow instruction and you set goals. It's not going to be a piece of cake day in and day out, but you got to be willing to sacrifice, dedicate yourself, and most of all, show some form of discipline.
I'm Jim Capsa, and today we've got a great show lined up for you, if I do say so myself. This is not going to be about baseball, football, or basketball, so it's going to be a little unusual for the Pro Sport Report. We are going to show you a rerun, a classic rerun from 5 years ago, featuring a real horse whisperer, a man that actually talks to horses. He communicates with horses in their own language. His name is Monty Roberts out of California. He's known throughout the world primarily because the Queen of England has taken him under her wing and mentored him to all the people in the horse business in England. And from there, he's gone all over the world. And you're going to love the show about Monty Roberts. And you're going to love Monty Roberts by the time our program is over today. And now, we're going to take you out to the ranch. We're doing an intro in the grand outdoors, and we're going to show you the original, real horse whisperer, Monty Roberts. You're going to love it. Howdy folks, Jim Capsa here on the ranch, and we welcome you to the ranch. Today's show on the Pro Sport Report is not going to be about baseball or football. It's going to be about horses, and one man and his horses in particular. This is the videotape that we're going to be showing you today, also available on DVD. It's called Monty Roberts, a Real Horse Whisperer. And this is put out by the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, and we thank them for allowing us to use this on our show today. This is going to be one of the most memorable shows that we've done. I'm very sure about that. So if you've got a VCR and if you got a blank videotape, pop it in there and hit the record button right now. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about this man called Monty Roberts. This is his first book. It's called The Man Who Listens to Horses. This book came out in 1996. It spent 58 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. Monty Roberts is known worldwide. The Queen of England even invited him to Windsor Castle to do his thing for her guests at Windsor Castle, and she was very impressed. The latest book out by Monty Roberts is this one, Monty Roberts, The Horses in My Life. He's got stories about 44 horses out of the tens of thousands of horses that he's trained throughout his life. And believe me, when I first saw this on the bookshelf, I thought to myself, why would I want to read about the horses in Monty Roberts' life? But it's one of the best books I've read in a long time, along with The Man Who Listens to Horses, and millions of people have read that book. But if you get a chance and you haven't read it, go to your bookstore and pick it up. When Monty Roberts breaks wild horses using humane methods, not using a rope to tie them up, the way cowboys used to do it in the old days, he uses humane methods. He spent so much time with horses out in the wild that he got to know their language. And Monty Roberts is just amazing in the way he talks and listens to horses, and the horses become his friend. Even if they're wild horses, they become his friend. You're going to be amazed at this. Here's Monty Roberts.
I'm constantly hearing, well, of course, that one was easy. He was just a piece of cake. It wouldn't work on one that wanted to resist you at all. And they just scoff at me and put me down. Now's my chance. We have a wild one.
This is not going to be easy. A lot of people have been killed trying to break Mustangs.
I think he's absolutely crazy and runs a risk of being killed. Really, honestly.
Chances of success, not very good. The risks are internal injuries, broken bones. You see a lot of cowboys without teeth. Some of it had to do with that.
He's going out with the wild ones. Wild.
Yeah, they've broke wild horses before. Maybe not his method.
Not his method, that's my
But
point.
they've broken.
You gonna do it? You wanna go with him?
Well,
well now, see, you don't... I don't either.
My insurance company don't cover me. So
See how that is.
I'm out there.
If you've ever been around a horse, you know the most dangerous part of the horse is his front feet, not his back feet. His back feet hurt you. The front feet kill you.
The front feet in this case belong to a wild Mustang. A man called Monty Roberts plans to take such a dangerous and untamed horse and persuade it to be saddled and ridden simply by talking to it.
They are wild. They are wild to a degree that they would be very dangerous when you're up close, but they would never want to be up close. So getting up close to them is very difficult to do.
Mustangs are wild horses that escaped from the Spanish centuries ago to roam over the western states of America. Although small in build, they're fast, very dangerous, and can easily kill a man. Yet these are the horses that Monty hopes to talk into tameness.
Your obligation then is to break this barrier.
Monty Roberts is renowned throughout the horse world for his remarkable ability to persuade an unbroken horse to accept a saddle and rider in less than 30 minutes, a process that normally takes weeks. 2 years ago, QED showed how Monty does it. Perhaps because it is so amazing to watch and seems so easy, some think Monty must be cheating by using partially tamed horses. So to prove them wrong, he's decided to put himself on the line. His method will face the ultimate test as Monty tries this on a Mustang in the wild. However, many are convinced that this time he'll fail.
But there's a very happy horse.
It is going to happen. How do I know that? The horses told me. For 50 years they've been telling me.
I wasn't in the horse business till I was 3. I was showing horses in competition before the age of reason. My father used me as basically a calling card to his riding school. If this 4-year-old, then 5, 6, and 7-year-old could just whip all the competition up to, say, 16 years of age, you ought to go to that school, you know.
All right, talent set to go. Prescott, here's where it all began. Help me.
Monty grew up in the Western riding tradition and as a young man started to compete in rodeos.
I won masses of championships in rodeo. I won the national championship in 1957. I wasn't a particularly talented rodeo competitor. I worked like heck at it and got good enough to win. I enjoyed it though. Showing my horses and rodeoing was my life for about 22 years or so.
Monty first really got to know wild horses when he was 14. He had gone out to Nevada to trap them for a wild horse race. And as he stalked them, he learned something surprising about their behavior.
My first discovery was that the black stallion didn't lead the family group. I always thought the stallion in the movies, you know, when I was a child, he was in charge of everything. Well, stallions aren't in charge of much of anything. They're in charge of getting the mares pregnant, and they're in charge of protecting their harem from being taken away by other stallions. End of story. What I saw was that it's the mare. It's the female, generally an older female. She's the one who makes the rules. She's the one who says where we'll eat today, the direction we'll travel, where we'll drink, when we'll drink. She will babysit with multiples of youngsters and be a role model for those youngsters, telling them what was acceptable, what wasn't, and scolding them when they were wrong. And I discovered that the scolding process was to isolate. Now, what is this? Send that little guy out there and leave him out there on his own. And he knew. Somehow he knew he's supposed to stay out there. Being isolated from the herd is a sentence of death. The predators will come along and see an isolated grazer. Within 48 to 72 hours, they will die. Their herd instincts are incredibly strong. They have power in numbers. And if several mares are kicking at a mountain lion, they can do him a lot of harm. And remember that a mountain lion with his teeth kicked in is a dead mountain lion. So he doesn't want to be hurt. He wants the easiest prey he can find. An isolated grazer is like smorgasbord. The dominant mare, when she sent the colt out there, she would be communicating with him that he's to stay out there. And I saw how she communicated. Eyes on eyes, square shoulders. Kept him out there for maybe 2 hours. And when she felt he'd paid enough of a price for whatever action he had done negative, she would walk in a circle and she'd start to make her motions round and sort of drop her head like this and look away. And he'd start to come back in. And he would slip back into the group. Well, it was a revelation to me. Then I'd go home and start fiddling about with it with my horses, and I was, wow, it's right, you know? Even my body, not built like the horse, would cause this reaction and response to the language.
Monty calls this horse language equus. He uses it when he tames a horse to take a saddle and a rider. It's the key to his success. This horse is used to wearing a head collar but has not been broken in. What Monty is going to do now is imitate the behavior of a dominant mare.
He's got a few little battle scars on him.
Monty's technique has been studied by animal behaviorist Dr. Robert Miller.
Monty wants this horse to see him as a surrogate herd leader. For example, in his round pen techniques, takes a line and frightens the horse by throwing it out. That's a frightening visual stimulus. The horse moves, and he keeps it moving. And he keeps the horse moving until the horse has gone its biological flight distance, roughly a quarter of a mile. Basically, it's just a little bit farther than a lion is capable of charging.
Eyes on eyes, all my motions square.
It runs that distance and then turns around to see what it was that frightened it. You run first, then analyze what it was. This is typical equine behavior. And then the horse will start to signal with body language, lowering the head, licking the lips, and chewing. It starts to signal, I'm in big trouble. I've run the necessary distance. That thing is still chasing me. I'm afraid I'm going to die. I need help. I need a leader. And the only game in town is the man in the center of the pen.
If he drops his head down near the soil, it means that if we could have a meeting, I'd let you be the chairman of the meeting. If he licks and chews, it means I'm a herbivore. There's the head down. So that means I'll let you be the chairman of the meeting.
When the horse signals a sufficient level of submissiveness, Monty suddenly becomes passive and non-threatening.
Attempt to draw him. I'm going to tell you when the licking and chewing.
He turns away, lowers his gaze. He immediately becomes passive.
To cause him to understand that I've moved from aggressive to passive. Good licking and chewing.
This horse then comes to him and in effect asks, would you help me? Are you my leader? I need help. And he then, without threatening the horse, very quietly strokes the horse.
Round movements instead of square movements. Reward him now for coming to me.
And the horse, you'll see, gratefully moves its head, licks its lips, and says, well, thank you. I'm so glad. Then he has what he calls join-up.
In an effort to accomplish follow-up. Follow-up. Perfect. Good licking and chewing.
Then, as he moves around, the horse does the horse thing. He follows the leader. And the more he follows him, the more comfortable he is. Horses seek comfort.
He set off to prove that his gentle way would work with even the wildest of horses, the Mustang. This time, however, he wasn't going to do it in the confines of a round pen, but in the wide open spaces of the high desert in California. What's about to happen has never been seen before, and it is so demanding that whether he succeeds or fails, Monty has said that he will never attempt it again.
Keep the herd to the west. Don't let them come back east on us, because if they come back east, they're going to gather up with that Mustang again. They're going to tease him back to them.
The Mustang was from Nevada. It had been kept with a herd of semi-wild rodeo horses for several weeks and handled as little as possible. The first job was to separate him from the other horses so that Monty could start to talk to him. With the Mustang free to run over miles of open territory, taming this horse was going to take a lot more than 30 minutes. Days, in fact. If he could do it at all, that is.
This bona fide, registered, freeze-branded, wild Mustang is going to come back to me and say, I want to be with you. You're okay. And I'll take this saddle, I'll take this bridle, and I'll take this rider. That's all I've ever said I could do, and I'll do it.
Late Easter Sunday afternoon, and out in the high desert, the Mustang was still not convinced it was good to talk. By early afternoon, the rain clouds were clearing away. Monty had asked Caleb, a young helper who brought him fresh horses, to ride on the other side of the Mustang.
They're going to try to get that halter on him, moving very slowly so as not to precipitate a flight reaction. This is quite dangerous, not because the horse is aggressive, it's just a very frightened animal. And in its fear of being unable to flee, it could strike or kick and injure either the riders or the other horses, or itself.
You're a tough little nut, you know that? Right down to the wire. Oh.
That's all right.
The Mustang was listening to Monty, but it was still wild and wary. By now it was late afternoon on Easter Monday, and enough for one day. The tricky job of putting on a saddle could wait until the next morning.
This is nice.
Wrangler Scott Silvera was well aware of the risks involved.
You go ahead. You go ahead. Make your move. Get your halter, do whatever you want. Ooh now. Ooh now. Ooh now. Ooh now. Ooh. Easy now.
He's used to the people, he's used to the saddle, but he's not used to the weight of a rider on his back.
Do it, son. Do it, son. Be a nice boy. Be a nice boy. Easy now. Easy now. Then you make your move. You go for it. Hey, there you are. All right.
Monty had done it. In less than 3 days, he'd achieved what many thought was impossible.
That's a tense time, isn't it? It's wonderful. Are you kidding me? It's wonderful. You know you can do it, but it isn't until it happens, you know? Just walking right on around, right and left. That's good. That's good. It's just the most wonderful feeling you could ever have. I'm really happy.
Isn't it remarkable that this was a frightened wild animal? Look at it now.
Wonderful.
Look how much has been accomplished. And it's been done without injuring the animal, without brutality. It's been done by gentle psychological means.
Monty's dream had come true. He'd proved that by talking to it in its own language, even the wildest of horses will learn to respond.
It's been said by good horsemen that if learning is 1 to 10, the most important part of learning is 0 to 1. It's the same with children, I believe. If children can hear positive things about tiny little improvements, they respond very favorably.
At his farm in California, Monty's theories about horses have been applied to raising children. He and his wife, Pat, have 3 children of their own and dozens of foster children.
We had 47 foster children. Almost all of them came to us at 11, 12, and 13 years of age, which is long after life's patterns have already been deeply set in.
Well, I hope you enjoyed our show today, sports fans. Not being about baseball or football is a little unusual on our show, but this was a special occasion. Monty Roberts, A Real Horse Whisperer, is the videotape. And if you can't find this in your video store, send your card or letter to me, Jim Capsa, at the Pro Sport Report, Post Office Box 135, Berwyn, Illinois 60402. This is the first book, The Man Who Listens to Horses, the story of Monty Roberts. This came out in 1996, spent 58 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list. This may not be in the bookstores anymore, but you can request it. It's still in print. And Monty Roberts' latest book, Monty Roberts, The Horses in My Life. This is available in the bookstores right now. So there you have it, sports fans. A little bit of baseball, a little bit of hockey, and a lot about Monty Roberts, the real horse whisperer. I really enjoyed doing those interviews way back in 1982 with Ernie Banks and Stan Mikita. And I enjoyed everything about Monty Roberts and what he does on his farm, Flag Is Up Farms in California. And if you want to contact me about anything that you see on this show, our address and email is coming up in the credits, and you can get information about Inside Baseball and The Scout and how you can obtain these DVDs as well. Until next time, I'm Jim Capsa. Have a happy day, sports fans.